Yes, guys, welcome back. Another episode of Teams Like Brighton. And ladies and gentlemen, we are approaching the business end of the season. We have just, precisely 15 matches left, all of which will no doubt have some thrills and spills at the end of it. And hopefully, Richie, you and I could be talking about potential trips to Europe.
Oh, God. Well, yes, that's a nice little segue to our first item on the agenda. One man who is not short of confidence is Moises Caicedo. And obviously did something of a U-turn last week when he signed a deal until the summer of 2027. And Brighton have the option of extending that by a further year, which is fantastic news for Brighton. Whether or not that's just kind of going to add an extra zero maybe on the price tag, who knows? But specifically, Caicedo said about Brighton's goals this season, he said, "We are trying to get into the Champions League. That is the dream of the team, to get us to the highest point possible and bring happiness to the fans who are always supporting us. It will be very difficult, but we are very convinced we can do it together. We want to keep going until the end, and we are sure we will do it." So, I mean, that's a real statement of intent there, Tom.
I'm just grinning. I'm like the fact that he just came out with that, and I'm just thinking like, geez, here we go, boys. But it's not out of our reach. If we've got 3 games in hand on Spurs, we win all those, we're fourth. So long as other games in hand results go in our favour, and that's wishful thinking. But if we win all 3 matches on Spurs, we're in that race for top 4, let alone top 6. So it's not out of our reach, which is really bizarre to say. I can't believe that I'm actually saying this, that we are potentially in this top 4 race. I say, and I cannot stress this enough, potential. I do think that we've got the capabilities of it, but it'd be interesting to see how
you think Brighton have the capability to get into the top 4?
There's potential. Look, Liverpool have all of a sudden discovered their form again. Spurs are shaky. Newcastle have 2 games in hand over Spurs, but they're struggling at the moment. They haven't won in a very long time. They're just not getting the goals in at the moment. They're really missing out on Bruno Guimaraes. Fulham seem to have lost their fire in their belly as well. They've only picked up 2 wins in their last 5, and they've played the same amount as Spurs have. So we have the Palace game coming up. That's one of the games in hand. Then after the FA Cup weekend with Grimsby Town, we're now back to 3 games in hand again, because of the Manchester United game being cancelled. So then it's Man United, it's Bournemouth. Richie, remind me the other game. Newcastle. So yeah, there we go. We've got a massive 6-pointer in the mix of that as well, just to make things a little bit more interesting. So, every game matters now. Every game matters. We're not in this mid-table position where we're just like, oh, if we could get a couple of good wins or a couple of good runs under our belt ahead of the season, that'd be great going into the pre-season. No, we're in this position where, starting with Leeds, every game matters. Every game is almost a must-win. It's almost like every game's our cup final, basically, which adds more to the Palace match for sure. But there's still so much for us to do, and there's a lot. There's a lot of very difficult matches ahead of us as well. So it'll be interesting to see how we get on and how the others get on, because we're going to be in for a really exciting race for Europe.
For sure. And obviously, yeah, it's a very salient point about this run of games. So obviously, Leeds are in 17th. Palace, even though they're, looking like they're mid-table at the moment, the gap to the relegation zone, I think, is only 6 points for them. And then you've obviously got, after the international break, you've got Brentford and Bournemouth. So Brentford, that's a massive sort of test to see who is the most likely as an outsider to maybe crash the top, European places. But then just going to your point about the tough fixtures coming up. Spurs on April the 8th. Away. Chelsea away a week later. And then the following weekend at home to Man City. That is, I mean, I'm pretty sure that, that's the ultimate test. That is such a tough run on paper anyway.
It really is.
I think, if Brighton want to still be in that race, kind of over those, that's 6 or 7 games, they probably need to be winning at least half of those to really keep up, because obviously it's not just a case of you're losing, it's the other teams who are around you are winning. So like you say, it's a sort of a 6-pointer. So but yeah, I personally don't like to get too carried away. I know you're not that case, Tom.
I'm usually the sensible one in my group of mates. I'm not feeling like that at all. There's probably the kid in me like 2-3 years ago is probably shouting at me, going, "Calm yourself, calm yourself. Nothing's certain just yet." But it's interesting you say that in our April fixtures. You haven't even mentioned Bournemouth away before that. After the City match, you then got Forest away and then Wolves at home in the space of 4 days. There's no easy feat here. There's no easy run. There's no run where you just think easy three games in 3. There is nothing like that. Forest, the City ground is Forest's saving grace, I think, from relegation. This is the same Forest side that got a point against Man City at the City ground. I'm not full of massive confidence that we get something out of it. And then you look at May's fixtures as well. You've got Everton at home, and Dyche Ball is that kind of... Sean Dyche is the kind of manager that knows how to stop the momentum of De Zerbi Ball playing in its midst. So it'd be interesting how we find a solution to that. You then got Arsenal away, which is, it's Arsenal at the moment. And granted, we may have got a result against them last season, a result with them this season in the Cup. But, that's 2-3 games before the end of the season. So the title race is still up for grabs there. Southampton at home is probably the anomaly in it all. And then you've got Villa away against Unai Emery. King of time wasting, and just he knows how to grind the result. So, and let's not forget the last time we were away to Aston Villa, when Jack Grealish scored the jammiest goal I've ever seen in my life, and it stopped us from winning the championship title. So, Duncan March will probably be going there for revenge, but there's so much there. There's not an ounce of me that thinks we've got a good run here. Every team's more or less got something to prove come the end of the season in the last 15, and it's worrying, but I'm excited as well. But let's go ahead, because we're digressing about the whole of the season. Leeds. It's hard to imagine the fact that Brighton are in the European, fighting for European spots, and Leeds, little old Leeds, battling for relegation. It's a bit bizarre, isn't it, Richie?
Yeah, I mean, it's Leeds is an odd one, because obviously they got promoted for the first time in 16 years back in 2020 under Marcelo Bielsa, and played a really, really exciting brand of football. And then the wheels really well and truly fell off. And then obviously Jesse Marsh came in, and it wasn't pretty. And they stayed up by the skin of their teeth after beating Brentford on the final day, and Newcastle doing them a favour at Burnley. And at the start of the season, I'm not sure if you agree, Tom, but when Leeds came to the Amex and lost 1-0, and they put up a decent fight, Brighton did deserve the win under Graham Potter. But I thought this is a team who's, I don't think they're going to be in a relegation fight again, just by the way that they played. Obviously, they've beaten Chelsea 3-0 not that long ago. I guess maybe that was maybe not so impressive now looking back. But they look like they could be not up for another sort of relegation fight. And then slowly but surely it became quite apparent that Leeds were just pretty chaotic. Like there wasn't really any plan or structure under Jesse Marsh's sort of game plan. I remember I think there was a fan took a photo of like tactics that were posted in Leeds' dressing room from Marsh, and one of them was basically like kick the ball forward and win the ball back in the opposition final third. And you're like, this is such schoolboy tactics. Like it was just there was no width to their play, and obviously they it looked like they were in really deep trouble before the World Cup, and then they randomly got a couple of mad wins over Bournemouth and Liverpool and Bournemouth, sorry. And then they stuck with Marsh, and it didn't work out. And obviously, then they they brought in Javi Gracia, the former Watford boss. And by the looks of things, because Leeds were pretty much sort of leaking 2 goals a game, it looks like they've sharpened up at the back, but conversely, they are now struggling to score goals. I think a big part of that is Rodrigo's out injured, their top scorer. He's been out for a while. But yeah, I mean, the similarity with West Ham is that Brighton are another bogey team for Leeds. I'm just looking at the head-to-head here. Going back to so they've only beaten Leeds. Sorry, Leeds have only beaten Brighton. Last time they beat them was in 2017. And what's that? So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. They've beaten them once in 12 games. Most of that was in the Championship. And Brighton arguably should have done the double over Leeds last year, but Leeds managed to kind of come away with 2 important points in their relegation struggle. But yeah, it just seems like Leeds are in a transition period. They're trying to, but they've got like I think 49% owned by the San Francisco 49ers. So they're sort of waiting to have them come in, and there's a lot of unrest. And I think Brighton, with the way they're playing, they could really heap more misery on Leeds because of just their creativity. I think Gracia will probably try to, I don't know, I can't see them being too attacking just because of the way that Brighton play. So it should be an interesting game, but yeah, I think Brighton are definite favourites there. What about you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're going into this match expecting a win. The boys are probably going to be thinking we can win this. We've got to win this. There's no real any excuse for us to go in this game but get a win. I think a result might be enough if we return to winning momentum. But bizarrely, we just find ourselves in a position where we're playing against a team who are, I think, one of the leakiest sides in the league, like you mentioned, like averaging 2 goals conceded. So against a side that creates chance after chance after chance, and we scored 4 against West Ham last weekend. So Leeds will probably be thinking, God, we need to find answers to stop this lot quickly. And like you say, they've got a new manager in finally. I mean, they did pick up a win a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, against Southampton. Yeah,
against Southampton. So it was a big win for them there. It's a big 6-pointer, and that helped them. I think there's only now a point difference between them and Southampton.
And that was their first win since prior to the World Cup, which is a crazy long run.
That's not a return or any return to form, really. That's just an anomaly in my book. But it's important for the guys to come in. I've actually just looking at the league table, and I do find it hilarious the fact that Leeds, granted they've been leaky, they've actually scored more goals this season than Chelsea.
Wow.
Yeah. It's nuts, isn't it? Chelsea scored 24, Leeds have scored 29. So again, that we're in this position where it's uncharted territory for us. And I don't think many fans know how to handle themselves, including myself. But I think a lot of the players do, and De Zerbi clearly does. And I think he's sent that message and that mentality forward, because otherwise we wouldn't have Moises Caicedo going on record to say we're aiming for Champions League. So it'd be interesting to. It'll be exciting. Don't get me wrong, but I am really hoping for a win at the weekend at Ellen Road.
Yeah, I think Leeds. So just kind of obviously they were much more leaky under Marsh, and now Gracia sort of tied it up. But yeah, I think they are struggling before, because if you look at sort of the teams around them in terms of goals scored, they're basically the second best outside of Leicester. So it looked initially like they would be able to kind of keep themselves out of trouble by kind of scoring their way out of trouble. But now the goals have dried up. And I just feel that, the sort of the confidence Brighton have, the way that they're playing, even if there's going to be there'll be a raucous crowd at Ellen Road, but I just feel that Brighton will have too much quality and sort of inventiveness and ingenuity just to kind of maybe get round the sort of huff and puff of Leeds. They do have good players on their day, like Wilfred Donto, the young 19-year-old, is a very exciting prospect who's arguably become one of their best players. The weird thing about them was that Jesse Marsh said, I think in the summer, that Nonto wasn't Premier League ready, and then they had a bit of a chaotic summer transfer window day. And then after not being able to get their main targets, they're like, oh, let's get Nonto in. And then Nonto's been one of their best players. So that kind of shows a little bit of how muddled some of the thinking is at Leeds' board, and how some of the fans aren't particularly happy. Obviously, players like they got rid of Rafinha and Calvin Phillips, and then brought in lots of other players, but they haven't done as well, I think. Patrick Bamford hasn't really been scoring. He's been very injury prone. But just going back to, I would like to see Nonto versus Lamptey. That would be really interesting, because you've got two sort of speedsters there. I wonder if it will be a case of, do you sort of attack them by going with a Lamptey, but obviously he'll bomb forward sometimes, and then that might leave him having to track back and Nonto going ahead, or do you have the more reliable Veltman in defence? I think it should be a good game. I think Brighton will nick it, but we're gonna get a bit more insight on Leeds. The view from the opposition. We're going to speak to Will Jackson of LeedsLive to give us some expert intel on Brighton's upcoming opponents. Hey guys, so I'm really happy to be joined by Will Jackson of LeedsLive, who covers Leeds every single week. Will, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm not too bad, thank you, mate. Yourself?
Yeah, all good, Tom. So let's crack on. It's been a strange season, I guess, for Leeds, because obviously they stayed up by the skin of their teeth last season. It looked like they weren't going to have the sort of same issues that they did the previous campaign. So how would you sum up Leeds this season, and where has it kind of gone wrong, I guess?
Probably in a word, I'd say tough. As you say, it started off pretty well. They beat Wolves at home, first game of the season, beat Chelsea, and then went to Brighton. And I'd say that game sort of sums up the season in a nutshell, where there's been positive aspects of it, but ultimately fallen short, and that's just been the case all too often this season. Obviously, we started with Jesse Marsh. I think it wasn't working with him. It got to the point where he had to go by February. It was just they weren't getting the best out of the players that they've got in the squad that they've got. They've invested heavily in this squad as well. I mean, January alone, they spent about 70 million, I think it was, bringing in Jorginho Rutter and Weston McKennie, albeit on loan, but with a view to a permanent deal, and Max Verber. So they're giving Jesse Marsh, all the tools to do the job, and it just wasn't happening for him. So I think he probably had to go, and they've brought in Javi Gracia, where it's 2 games into his reign now, and I suppose the pressure's on a little bit.
Yeah, so I just want to ask, what's the kind of early impressions, but what's the difference between a Gracia Leeds and a Jesse Marsh Leeds?
Yeah, so I mean, first thing you notice it's a bit more of a it's a bit more of a possession-based game, whereas obviously Jesse Marsh, it was very high intensity, pressing high up the field, trying to force mistakes, and when you're on the ball, it was a very narrow game where you're trying to Freddie Ivan sort of stuff, and looking for that Hollywood pass almost through the lines and trying to be inch perfect that way. Whereas with Javi Gracia, he's only had two games free if you include the FA Cup, which was a change side anyway, but looks more of a possession-based game. It's a bit more solid at the back, I'd say, as well. Going forward, it's not been great. The created chances, they're just lacking that killer edge at the minute, that finishing touch. And I think that's where you're looking at, club record signing Jorginho Ruta to step up and score them goals. But it's I mean, look, it's 2 games in. He's still making his mark, and he's still got. I suppose he still hasn't made his mark fully just yet.
And you'd mentioned goals. Why do you think it's sort of dried up goals-wise for Leeds of late?
It's difficult to put your finger on it because they were scoring a lot of goals at the start of the season. I mean, I think they scored 22 in the first 14 games, I think, just before leading into the World Cup break, and obviously, and they finished that first chunk of games with a 4-3 win over Bournemouth and a 4-3 defeat at Tottenham. So the goals were flying in, and they were confident in front of goal. Whether that break sort of sucked the momentum out of them going forward wise, you'd have to say so. It looks that way. Rodrigo's been injured as well the last 6 weeks or so. He got injured in the FA Cup win over Accrington Stanley. I think he's got 10 goals in the Premier League and 12 goals altogether. So he's a massive fixture in their attack, and he's huge in the way that he plays for Leeds' attack. He's probably been a much maligned figure at Leeds over the last couple of seasons, but this season he's really come into his own. And he's looked the part. So hopefully he's coming back possibly this week. I think he's been training this week. So that's one for Brighton to look out for, I think.
Yes, it's an interesting point about Rodrigo, because I was at the 1-1 draw at Ellen Road last season, and Rodrigo did not have a particularly good game. I remember him sort of passing the ball out of play, and the fans really getting on their back. It's an interesting turnaround from that. And obviously you touched on Rodrigo. Obviously you've spoken to Javi Gracia today. Can you just run through maybe some of the team news for Leeds, who might be missing for the game and who's maybe a maybe, or that sort of thing?
Yeah, so it's a bit ambiguous with Javi because he doesn't like to reveal any sort of team news whatsoever. You've got to think of clever ways to ask your questions, really, to get any sort of team news out of him. But he did sort of let slip that Sinistera and Rodrigo were training this week. He didn't confirm whether they'd be involved. He said there would be a decision to make how best to use them and whether it would be even worth risking them in the first place. I think Rodrigo's still 2 weeks ahead of schedule. I think he was due for about 8 weeks out on the sidelines when he first got injured, and I think it's only been 6. So I think it's sort of ahead of schedule for him. Sinistera's got a hamstring injury at Old Trafford last month. But fingers crossed he's available as well, because he's had an awful season really in terms of injuries. Has been in and out of the side, but when he's been in the side, he's been a real threat. So I think everyone wants to see him back. Other players, I don't know if they're going to be in or not. As I say, Javi's really keeps his cards close to his chest. But Liam Cooper fighting to try and get fit at the minute. Skipper, I don't know if he gets into the side given the way that Max Verber and Robin Koch have been playing at the minute at the back. But he's got plenty to add to the team in terms of leadership. Patrick Bamford as well, I think, might be in contention. Again, don't know for certain. But he only missed last week of a leg injury. And the word was last week that he'd be back for this week. So, touch wood that he's going to be fit as well and give him more attacking options because, as I've already said, they've been poor going forward and they were pretty toothless last week at Chelsea.
You touched on it a little bit, but and obviously it's a very small sample size, but what would you say are the maybe strengths and then weaknesses of this Leeds team at the moment? Are any of the kind of, issues that were previously there still there, or have they been ironed out at all?
Well, the weaknesses, as I've alluded to, it's going forward. They can't. There's just no attacking threat at the minute. I mean, the 1-1 at Southampton, but against Southampton, but at Fulham in the FA Cup, I think they had like 16 shots, I think, in total, and obviously they could have played until now, and I don't think they'd have scored at Fulham last week. It was that bad. And Chelsea last week, they have 2 shots on target, and one of them, the best chance that fell to Ilan Meslier in the last minute with the goalkeeper, just with a header from a corner. That was the best chance I had at goal. Javi Gracia has spoken today about practicing finishing, and I think he's happy with the fact that they're creating some chances. It's just finishing it, and it's just being clinical, which I think probably Brighton have been clinical actually this season. It's just, they're just looking for that killer edge, and Javi Gracia believes that he can coach that on the training ground. So I think that's what he's tried to do this week. Probably strength, it's defence. That's probably since the World Cup break. While they may have taken a step back attacking wise, they have taken a couple of steps forward at the back. They've been pretty strong, and I really like the combination that Max Weber and Robin Koch have in the middle. Junior Firpo has been very strong. Again, like Rodrigo, another much maligned figure. But Junior Firpo has come back into the team, and he really looks the part. He's performed really well, and he's probably in the best form of his Leeds career so far at the minute. And Luke Ayling on the right, he's had to fight back from Rasmus Christensen came into the side in the summer, and he was meant to be like the next right back, squad progression and stuff. But Luke Ayling's come fighting back, and he's claimed that right back spot. So I'd say probably defence is definitely the strength at the minute.
And on the flip side, who would you say, the Brighton people listening, so who would you say is kind of the players to watch Leeds wise? Yeah,
well, if you've seen Leeds since Christmas, you probably noticed Willy Gnonto. Look, he's an Italian international, but he's only 19 years old. His arrival sort of came under the radar. Leeds were looking for a striker in the summer transfer window deadline. They didn't get one, and in the end, they managed to get hold of Wilfried Gnonto, who from the Swiss league, from FC Zurich, who obviously no one had heard of really. He had to wait for his chance. I think it was October at Liverpool where he made his debut. But since then, he's been in the side. He made 11 straight starts since Christmas. And he was surprisingly dropped last weekend. Just I think it was more of just give him a bit of a break rather than anything to do with the way he's been playing. But he's a real live wire. He plays on the left. He can play as a second striker as well. He's one to watch. In terms of other threats, Crescencio Somerville's a live wire on the right. I don't know if he'll play though. Depends on the situation with Sinisterra, and probably Jack Harrison as well. Jack Harrison's not been in great form at the minute. And probably Rodrigo if he plays as well. His goal record's enough to show that he's the chief threat really.
I'm going to put you on the spot here. Obviously, it's very, very close. 7 or so teams, or if not more, who are kind of fighting it out at the bottom. Do you think Leeds will stay up this season?
It's a tough one. I genuinely believe they have the personnel to stay up and remain a Premier League team. It's just keeping fit. That's the problem. Look, they've got the fixtures. I mean, Brighton's probably not one, but they play Wolves, who are down there. They play Palace, who are down there. They play Nottingham Forest, who are down there, and Bournemouth and Leicester. I mean, if you win them 5 games, then that might arguably be enough. I'm going to say to stay up, but it's got to be by the skin of the teeth.
Good stuff. And final one. So obviously we're a couple of days out from the game. What's your score prediction for the Ellen Road fixture?
I'll go 1-1, just like last season. it can be a feisty atmosphere at Ellen Road. I think they're going to be up for this one just because the pressure's on, and the fans are aware that need every single point. So it can be a difficult atmosphere to step into if you're not used to it. I'll back them to get a point and score a goal, which might be a change.
Well, great. Thanks so much for coming on. Do you want to just finish off by saying where people can read your content and social media, that sort?
Yeah, so it's I work for LeedsLive. Obviously, that's leeds-live.co.uk, and there'll be a piece with you, Richie, in the next couple of days as well. So thank you for that. Yeah.
Great. Well, yeah, thanks so much for coming on, and guys, keep on tuning in to Teams Like Brighton.